So today we're going to talk about how to go from a college budget, beer money budget, where you have very little income, if any, honestly, coming in, very inconsistent income coming in, like, you don't really know what you're doing. There's so many spending temptations in college also. So you barely have any money coming in, but you're also in an environment that encourages you to constantly spend, constantly eat out, constantly drink out, constantly buying cheap vodka at the liquor store. And then you get a job and you are in this environment where all of a sudden it feels like you have tons and tons and tons more money. So it may seem so silly, but when I was in college, I didn't have a job. I had like an allowance from my parents because I wanted, I had to focus on like my schoolwork, and luckily my parents were generous enough to give me an allowance every month. So my parents would give me an allowance and I would spend it. I would go out and spend it all the time. So in college, I spent a lot of money on everything. I spent a lot of money on the bars, on going out to eat, on new clothes, because you always want to be super fashionable. So in college, I had barely any money coming in, but I had a lot of money going out. I spent every dollar that came in, basically. And then when I got my full-time job, all of a sudden, so my first salary out of college was $65,000, which might sound like a crazy a lot to some people, and it kind of is, but I worked in Connecticut, which is a high cost of living. It's a pretty high, it's like one of the top states of like highest cost of living, and I graduated with an engineering degree. So I know I got like a higher paying job out of college than a lot of other people. But the point is, even if you make $30,000 right out of college, like at first, your very first paycheck, your first couple paychecks really feel like you're making so much more money. I mean, even now, think about whatever salary you make right now. Imagine if you made 30,000 more than that, right? Even if you're making 80,000 right now, if you made 110,000, that sounds crazy. If you're making 30,000, 60,000 sounds crazy. And going from 0 to 30,000 is like a lot of money. It can feel like a total like you're rich now. And I want to help you budget with that money, because it can feel like you're rich and it can feel like all this money's coming in, but what do you actually do with it? What are the smart things to do with it? And of course, what I tell all my students, all my clients, everyone who ever listens, is it depends on your goals. The only thing that you should be doing with your money is meeting your goals. So probably your goals are to be happier. Probably your goals are to save, maybe buy a house one day, maybe start a family one day. Hopefully one of your goals is pay off your debt. That should definitely be one of your goals, but maybe your other goals are be self-employed one day, travel. You may have all these bigger dreams, and I want to help you get there. So if you have a low income or an inconsistent income, and then all of a sudden going to a massive amount of money, of massive as in $30,000, of course that seems like a great problem to have, and it totally is, but it can be a problem if you're not using that money in the right way. So I want to give you some tips to kind of really get started using that money. So the first thing that I want to instill in your brain is, if you have student loans or any other kind of debt, pay that off. Pay off your debt fast. Pay off your debt as quickly as you can. So when I first graduated college, I was making $65,000. I was making a ton of money, or what felt like a ton of money to me at the time, right? But I didn't know I should pay off my student loans. Obviously, I knew like you're supposed to pay them back, but I had no urgency in my mind. I wasn't thinking, oh man, like this has gotta go as fast as possible. I was thinking, oh, my minimum payment's about $300. Yeah, I'll just do that. I wasn't thinking like, oh my God, I better make sure that I pay these loans off as fast as possible, because if I don't, interest is going to accrue and I'm going to end up paying thousands more dollars than I would have otherwise. So paying off your debt, I want you to know that paying off your debt is one of the most important things that you can do. If that's not a goal for you right now, it totally should be. And I'm not in the business of usually telling people what their goals should be. There could be reasons why maybe paying off debt isn't your number one priority, and that's okay. And that's something that I really work with, especially with my one-on-one clients, is getting clear on their exact goals so that they can use money as a tool to get there. But that being said, paying off debt should be one of your goals. One of your financial goals should be paying off debt as fast as possible. So I recommend that you start putting money towards that right away over your minimum payment. So if you're in a situation where you're not making much money, you have inconsistent money, and then you're going to like a full-time job salary, I would recommend putting as much of that towards your debt as you can, for sure. So right away, whatever your minimum payment is, try to pay a little more to that every month. And it's really important. The best tool that you have when you graduate college is that you're used to living off a small income. So it's really hard to go from living the lavish life to really cutting back and living off a lot less. But it's not as hard if you're used to living off less to continue living off less. You were happy in college. You were doing fine. Your holes in the wall didn't bother you. Your mismatched dishes weren't bothering you. So I would totally recommend keep living off as little as you can and put as much of that towards debt as you can right when you graduate. So hopefully you can continue living off a small amount. Keep your habits from college. Don't upgrade your cost of living. This is a really important tip. Maybe its own tip is don't upgrade your cost of living. Try to stay living off the same amount or maybe a little bit more than you are in college, because if you upgrade your life and immediately buy a fancy apartment, fancy car, fancy clothes, fancy food, whatever, it's going to be really hard to reel it back down so that you're not spending all that money, and you're going to get trapped in the rat race really, really quickly. And lifestyle creep in the rat race is one of the number one ways that people go broke. So living off your small income, and then what do you do with the extra money? It's going to feel like a lot of money. So spending a little is okay, but spending a lot's not. So put it towards debt. Put as much towards debt as you possibly can. So paying off your debt right away is a great thing. It may not feel like your number one priority out of college. When you graduate college, you might feel like, I'm free, woo, no more classes. I have an adult job. I can do anything I want with all of my time and money, which is kind of true. But don't let that get to your head, okay? Make sure to budget smartly with your money. And so paying off debt may not be a priority right when you graduate. You might feel like, oh, I got years to pay this off. Oh, I'm on a 10-year payment plan. I'll just follow that. But if you follow the 10-year payment plan that student loans set you up for, you are going to be setting yourself up to pay thousands of extra dollars in interest. And if you use the 10-year plan, you're going to be paying these loans for 10 more years. You are going to have a multi-$100 payment or whatever for 10 more years. Is that something you want? I don't think so. It may not feel like such a big deal right when you graduate and you're 22, living in a new town, got a lot of friends, whatever, what's one more payment? But when you get a little older, 10 years, by the time you're 32, you might be really, really sick of those debt payments. Do you honestly not think that between the time you're 22 and 32, you're going to maybe want a house. You're going to maybe want a fancy wedding. You're going to maybe need to upgrade your car. There's going to be big expenses that you have to pay for. Not your parents, not your grandparents, not your family, not your friends, not the government, but you are going to have to pay for between 22 and 32. So if you don't start paying off your debt now, your debt is only going to be a burden. Even if you somehow don't have any major expenses, you may want to take a vacation. You may want to go on a lavish trip, and before you have kids, and you may just want to live a fun life, and you're going to want money for that. And when you have those loans nagging you in your bank account, and every time you feel like your bank account gets a little higher, your loans pull you back, that's not something you want. So even if you don't think you care about paying off debt, and even if you think you're on a good plan, you're not. You need to pay off your debt as fast as possible. So please, put as much towards those minimum payments as you can right now, while you're still living on a lower cost of living, while you're still keeping some of your habits from college, while you're still having ramen noodles a couple times a month, while you're still okay with that lifestyle, put that extra money towards that. And then your debt will be paid off in a couple years. You can start saving, you can start retirement, and money will pile up so fast for you. I promise. It will feel like money will never ever pile up. Think about where you want to be in 10 years. Where do you want to be? What kind of life do you want to live? And what steps can you take now to easily get there? Think about if you want a mansion and you want $1 million mansion and you want to buy it yourself, okay? So if you need $1 million mansion, you're going to need to put down, and you want to put down 20%, you're going to need to put down $200,000. And that might seem like a crazy amount, but you know what's crazy? If in 10 years, if you live your life for 9 years, not paying attention to your money at all, and then you think, wow, yeah, remember that dream I had? Okay, I'm gonna go for it. And then you try to come up with $200,000. Like, that's not gonna happen. That's very difficult. Even if you want to live in a $100,000 house in 10 years, all you want to do is buy a house, no requirements. In 10 years, you want a house. That's a $100,000 house. You're still going to have to come up with a 20% down payment. That's $20,000. That's still a lot of money. If you're not paying attention to what you're doing with your money now, it's going to be really hard for you to just come up with $20,000 randomly, right? But imagine if you plan that out now. In 10 years you want a house. In 10 years that you want to pay a 20% down payment. And you're going to try to achieve $20,000 10 years from now. Isn't it a lot easier to come up with $20,000 10 years from now than it is 1 year from now? So in 1 year, I don't know where my phone is. Oh, I'm literally filming the live. Oh my God, I'm so stupid. But I was looking for my calculator. But anyway, so if in 1 year you want $20,000, what do you have to save every month? Like a little less than $2,000? Like, that's doable, but that's still a lot of money. But in 10 years, okay, in 10 years to save $20,000, divide by 10, that's not so much money. That's $2,000 per year rather than per month. It's easier if you break down your savings goal. If you know you're going to need a 20% down payment of $20,000 and you break it down over 10 years, that's like way less money per month, like $100 per month or whatever, $200 per month. But if you just want it in 1 year, that's like $2,000 per month. So the farther in advance that you can plan, the better it is. And the farther in advance that you can plan for these large expenses, the less you can pay every month. And then worst case scenario, let's say in 10 years, you realize, you don't want a house. You still have $20,000 sitting in the bank that you can invest, that you can do something else with. The other great thing about planning in advance is if you want a house in 10 years, you can put your money in investments in the stock market and watch them grow, so your money can make money for you and you don't have to save every dollar. My fiance bought a house at 26, and when we were shopping for houses and he was looking for money to put down the down payment, which was $50,000, I realized at the rate I was saving, I would never be able to hit that number at 26. I don't even know if I would have hit that number at 30. So by saving now, you can get to the goals that you want when you want them, rather than deciding, I want a house now. I wasn't dating my fiance that long before. So we moved in about a year after dating. I wouldn't have been able to save up that much money in a year. So it's really important to continue saving now while you can, so that when you want the things that you want, you'll be able to afford it. What if you want a baby? Don't you want to be able to financially give your child the best life possible, or be able to quit your job because you're so financially free so that you can stay at home with your baby if you want to, or take off work or have a more flexible schedule? Like, there's so many things that it's really helpful to plan in advance. And the great thing about saving and investing your money is you'll always have that money there for you, and you won't have to keep living paycheck to paycheck. All it takes is, it's so hard for people to break out of that paycheck to paycheck cycle, because when you're in that paycheck to paycheck cycle, you can't ever, it's so hard to break out. Breaking out is the hardest part. But once you break out and you, if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you can't afford the bills, you're always scrambling. And it can be so hard to just hang on to that extra dollar, because every time you want to get ahead,